Yes, and we are live. Very cool. Hello, everyone, and those of you tuning in. Fantastic to have you guys here. We are here with another episode talking all things chain abstraction. We have a packed lineup here. Absolute, chads of the chain abstraction space here. Jasper, Ethan, Connor, all representing their unique companies and their unique takes here. So this should be a very interesting conversation because we are, of course, going to be talking about future of chain abstraction. But what I am extremely keen on is to try and stick to the more tangible stuff instead of the rosy, ideal 2 years down the line, what's everything going to look like sort of stuff. So we're going to try and stick to the here and now and the immediate future in this conversation. And there are a bunch of other topics that are sort of close to my heart, which I'd love to get all these three gentlemen to kind of, speak their mind on. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So as usual, introductions is probably what we should start with, but let's just do this slightly different thing. I think at this point, for the audience who would probably be tuning in, I think all of you guys and your projects are quite well known. But so let's instead do like quick introduction, like who you are, who you represent, what do you do there, but follow that up with like a one liner on what is like your. Hey, we have Austin also. Yes.
Hello.
Austin, you made it.
I did. I did. It's good to see you all.
Fantastic. Yeah, so we're in the thick of it. So we're just starting off. And so what we're doing right up front is introduction. So, but what I'm requesting, because we have quite the packed lineup here, in the interest of time, quick introduction about yourself and what is your unique way in which your company are essentially looking to solve the problem of liquidity fragmentation. So I'll start first, so it gives everyone a cue on how we should probably go about it. I'm Mayur, I'm the founder and CEO of Arcana. For us, we are taking a very pragmatic approach, extremely pragmatic approach to solving the liquidity fragmentation problem, but with our chain abstraction protocol, and we're doing so by focusing primarily only on externally owned accounts at the moment, and everything else is superfluous to our design and our needs. Jasper, you want to go next?
Sure thing. I am Jasper. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Fat Protocol, and we're looking to solve liquidity fragmentation by providing sort of like any VM, any chain with the same standard of off-chain data access. So that can be, I don't know, it can be price feeds, it can be cross-chain data, really anything. Our network and our data feeds are completely programmable, so you can choose what sort of like security parameters you feel comfortable with for whatever use case you're building. And sort of like creating this like single standard for data access allows for a bunch of interesting chain abstraction use cases to be built on top of our network in part. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Fantastic. Ethan, you want to go next? What's the unique way Particle's approaching this?
Yeah, so my name is Tabasco. My real name is Ethan. I do a lot of things at Particle, but my official title is Developer Relations. Essentially, at Particle, we do something called universal accounts, which gives users one balance across all chains. But what I want to specifically address your question, I've been thinking a lot recently about like positioning not only universal accounts, but also chain abstraction in general as an actual solution to liquidity fragmentation. So your question was, how are you actually addressing or solving liquidity fragmentation? I had some debate with somebody on Twitter the other day where, we're talking about actually solving liquidity fragmentation or just abstracting liquidity fragmentation. The way that I see it is that most solutions on the market today, including ourselves, are not actually solving liquidity fragmentation. They're abstracting this from the end user. The fragmentation still exists underneath, the abstraction layer that we're building. It's still present there. There are other solutions that are addressing this, but we are specifically allowing the user to interact with the ecosystem without the perception of that fragmentation. So we are eliminating the perception of feeling like there's siloed chains and siloed liquidity across these chains. And so effectively with universal accounts, our contribution to this problem and to this kind of experience is somewhat similar to Arcana and Magic accounts, things of this nature, where it is just very simply allowing a user to have a balance that can be used universally across any application on any chain, and they don't need a bridge. And so this is an abstraction of the underlying liquidity fragmentation problem. It's the elimination of needing to cognitively understand that. And by the way, I tried the Arcana wallet actually just a few hours ago. I was doing I'm going to put together a video which is going to include a GIF of that, and it was solid. It was a really good experience. I recommend people to go give it a shot. But this is how I'm thinking about the problem, and I think account level solutions like Arcana and Particle, I see it as an abstraction rather than like an actual complete addressal of liquidity fragmentation.
Good. No, solid take. Thanks, and thanks for the shout out, man. Conor, why don't you go next?
Sure. I'm Conor Howe, one of the co-founders of Enso. Enso's a intent engine. What that means without the narrative is we help people build applications very quickly on top of blockchain, whether that's ranging from integrating and fetching data from a DeFi protocol, an NFT protocol, or any arbitrary outcome that can be verified on chain. It could be a smart contract outcome. In terms of liquidity fragmentation, we don't solve this. And what we do is we abstract of how to integrate with all these different liquidity sources. And then we have tools that are building on top of Enso for this.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Austin, what's your unique approach and Omni's unique approach?
Cool. Yeah. I like knowing of Tabasco as Tabasco. I feel like I've heard Ethan before, but I'm just going to delete it from my brain and you're going to stay Tabasco to me. But yeah, I think we're all, I mean, it seems like we're directionally aligned that what we can make the biggest impact on right now is abstracting away this fragmentation. I'm personally of the opinion that we'll never solve fragmentation. We'll never get everything unified together because people want to operate on different state machines, like different businesses want to run their own state machines. I just don't think the business incentives align for us to like put everything back into one universally shared state machine at this point, at least within the Ethereum ecosystem. So yeah, I'm a co-founder of Omni. I run our growth team as CEO. What we are focused on is building a solution so that people, very similar to how you all are thinking about it from a slightly different angle though, people don't have to be aware of this this fragmentation. So with our solution, somebody can have 100 USDC on Optimism, go to an application's front end, and the developers, if they integrate this SDK, they can basically just take that 100 USDC from Optimism, even if their application is on Arbitrum, for example. So in the same domain here, it's abstracting away the reality that there's different platforms here. And yeah, I think this is just the way it's going to be in the future. And like the way that we can make the biggest impact is through abstracting it away, not trying to get everything back on like one synchronous global state machine.
All right. So I think just general consensus is that we're not going to solve actual fragmentation. Fragmentation is going to exist. And what we do is essentially try and abstract it and hide it away from the users to varying degrees, I guess. Great. Yeah. So, I mean, Tabasco, you touched upon this earlier. We did release our wallet. It's part of like our go-to-market strategy. We really wanted to kind of showcase the capabilities of chain abstraction and put it in the hands of users. So, which is why we kind of took this route. And you know, we've done like multiple demos, numerous demos of the wallet itself for quite a while now. And there, with each of these demos, when you're dealing with people who interacted with say DeFi and wallets in general and have their liquidity fragmented, which is you know, some of the more like core sort of like not the crypto noobs but everyone else, I guess. There is what we've found is that there is this extremely palpable aha moment for each and every one of these people when we've shown them, you know, what the capabilities are. And we've had people tell us, "Oh, I'll switch overnight. You know, I won't use MetaMask, and I'll use this." And we're like, "No, this is just a GPM product. We're putting it out in beta and things like that." But all the same, I think, just from our experience, it's probably safe to say that, you know, chain abstraction is ready for the prime time. and it ought to kind of take up center stage. But what is it that what are the things that need to happen in the immediate short term? I'm talking about weeks and months for it to really start taking center stage. I know, Tabasco, you have this talk coming up about like the light bulb moment for chain abstraction. So why don't you go first? What is it going to take for it to start occupying significant mind share, and for people to really start appreciating what's happening, or the way we look at it in our own little niches?
Yeah, I think chain abstraction up to this point has been a lot of talk and like promises of like basically for a year at this point we've been saying we're going to build this amazing thing. Just wait, just give us a little bit more time, and we're going to do this great thing for the ecosystem. It's going to change everything. It's just around the corner. I feel like we've been saying this for a long time. Like I remember back in even January, February, in Denver, everybody talking about it, Chain Abstraction Day. That was back when it was ran by Frontier and Near. Look, we're about to like do this big thing for the ecosystem, and it's right around the corner. And so it's been a lot of just like us talking about what might be and what will be in the future. And I think people are tired of this. I myself am. I can talk about chain abstraction a lot, but I'm getting to a point now where I'm like, okay, I'm like, we're kind of saying the same thing over and over again. Like, let's just kind of get on with it now. And so I think that in the short term, chain abstraction will not continue to grow as a narrative until there is not only a tangible materialization of the promises in the narrative that we built here, but specifically, I don't see chain abstraction actually having significant mindshare growth in the beginning. I think over time it's inevitable, but in the beginning, I think it needs what you could consider a light bulb moment, or a better example is like ChatGPT for AI, right? So the AI sector was a sector that had a lot of enthusiasts and researchers and people that love to talk about the future. And then all of a sudden there was this application that was an actual tangible implementation of like an LLM, which is ChatGPT. And then all of a sudden everybody wants to talk about this now. And it's like it's its own vertical, right? It's taking shape into every product sector. I don't think the two are like one-to-one, you can't equate them 100%, but I think in the direction that we're going, in the short term, we need some sort of product or some implementation of chain abstraction, whether it's an app or whether it's a wallet or whatever else it may be, that gets people not only to understand what the vision is here, but so much so that they start using this day to day. People need to start understanding how significant of a UX improvement this is. And this needs to happen just through like something that kicks off, like the chain abstraction renaissance or whatever you want to call it. Something that has developers and users saying, okay, well, this is clearly a necessity from a user experience standpoint. And so I think what we're going to see, especially in kind of the more medium term, is that wallets are going to realize, like, okay, we need to be the first movers in this sector. We need to actually start implementing chain abstraction functionality. We've talked about this in the past. I think that a lot of the chain abstraction adoption is going to come from existing wallets that take the step to integrate solutions like potentially Arcana, like Particle, like magic accounts, and so on, to create chain abstracted interfaces. And so I think that's going to start being adopted over time. Applications, things like the Omni SDK and so on, are going to start emerging that are chain abstracted or have adjacent functionality. But this needs to happen through a push for the ecosystem. People need to essentially realize that this is valuable from a UX perspective. And in my opinion, that can't happen until we have some catalyst for that realization. I think we're going to have that within the next 2 months, maybe even less. I think there's going to be multiple products and multiple implementations that we'll release that will hopefully act as this kind of light bulb moment. But I think that this is what we need to get people and kind of to get the train moving on the actual implementation of chain abstraction here. Austin did a really interesting tweet about how chain abstraction will materialize and be implemented within the ecosystem over a longer period of time, in terms of like how public chains are going to react to these different things, and then kind of the paradigm shifts it's going to cause in the ecosystem. I think in the longer term, when you look at like 1-2 years, we're going to see a fundamental change to the entire ecosystem. But in the short term, there needs to be something that actually is basically us saying, like, look, guys, we're not like bullshitting you. This is like a real thing that you can actually start using. Mm-hmm. I think that's what we need right now to actually see the narrative continue to grow.
Got it. No, great. Yeah. And Austin's tweet, big shout out to that absolute banger of a tweet. And we'll come to some of that stuff further in this conversation. But I want to quickly jump over to Conor here, because I know, Conor, you put out a tweet yourself a few months ago, I think, about how product beats paper. And I think that is essentially what Tabasco is talking about here. And so what would you like to add?
Product beats paper. Put your money where your mouth is. And honestly, I think it's not bringing chain abstraction to pre-existing applications. I don't think that is going to be the killer product. I think the killer products are going to be new, innovative ideas that other people haven't even conceived of before, because they're now able to embed any smart contract, any chain. They're able to abstract all of this away for their users. So this, I think, will bring a new variety to kind of the applications that are going to be built. Now, where we are as of today, I think it's still a big narrative, right? And it's, I think, one of the strongest narratives as of today. I think Crypto Twitter, Tycho, has already kind of done analysis on this. Everyone's pushing it. But again, it really needs somebody to kind of take the charge to launch. And if they have launched, then, and then there's not that much traction, then they need to pivot. They need to bring something new to the table than just another wallet that has this abstracted away or whatever it may be. You need something new. And that's kind of what we see being built on top of Enso, right? Like, we have a new innovative two-sided marketplace that will basically eradicate airdrops and point programs from now on. Like, they will not exist anymore from this application being built on top of Enso. That's a whole new primitive, right? They weren't able to build that without kind of the Enso infrastructure being there. Then we also have like full Zapier of Web3, drag and drop of any smart contract interactions to then automate it, right? These are what I think are interesting, not only for intents, but also chain abstraction of these new innovative ideas than just embedding these solutions into pre-existing products, right? That's not going to really bring something new to this ecosystem. But yeah, the one thing I would say about this is, if the product's not shipped it right, like it loses a lot of credibility for me, honestly. It's product beats paper, ship it, prove it. If it gets users, then it's useful.
Got it, great. So essentially, we need to start shipping products, real examples that people can sort of like start integrating with. And yeah, it's probably going to take a whole new genre of product to make all of this happen. But yeah, so it would seem, to at least to us in our circles, and very shortly to the whole world, hopefully, that we are going to have this absolute game changer of this technology made available, where brand new things are going to get built on top of it. And something as disruptive as this is likely to have significant downstream effects that have long tail impact on the sector as a whole. Austin, you obviously spoke about this, and this is the tweet that we're talking about. It for those who haven't seen it, you should go check it out on Austin's profile, where you spoke about not only like the immediate, but the medium and long-term effects. Can you kind of give us a summary of some of those thoughts that you put together in that tweet about how all of this cool stuff that we are talking about and going to put in people's hands very soon is going to like change the industry, which is what you suggested in your tweet?
Yeah. So the TLDR, I believe the tweet that you're referring to was talking about how the Fat Protocol Thesis. I don't think it's right. And so for those of you who don't know what the Fat Protocol Thesis is, basically this piece was dropped in 2016 by like a very high quality fund. And the idea was that in the internet, the applications captured a majority of the value, and the like protocols did not. And it would be inverted in the blockchain space, that the protocols would capture a majority of the value and the applications would capture very little. This, in my opinion, captured significant mind share and led to people launching a bunch of new blockchains, trying to create their own new like L1, recreate a bunch of the existing applications that we have today, because that's how people valued these things. Obviously, the valuation of effectively every single one of these networks is entirely untethered from the actual revenue perspective. That is simply the reality today. And a lot of this valuation comes from people just having collective mindshare, like, ooh, lower in the stack, good. I think that's wrong. I think that actually the only thing that matters is order flow and proximity to the origination of it. That's exciting, working on chain abstraction stuff, because if you squint, a lot of this really is about simplifying the origination of order flow, making it easier for people to like declare, I want to do this thing. And then you kind of insert yourself into this transaction supply chain somewhere in order to help them get it done. So it's synergistic in the sense that like all these chain abstraction projects are focused on making it easier for people to originate order flow. But what I think is going to happen here is that there's a bunch of, not to be like too negative, but there's a bunch of vaporware projects out there that really aren't providing value. They aren't like actually driving a bunch of activity, and they also aren't really technically positioned to even change something substantially. A lot of them are more like duplicative of what's already out there. So I think over the next 3 years here, what's going to happen is some of these networks, specifically, or not even networks, some of these projects, specifically the ones that are closest to the origination of order flow, are going to start to accrue real serious revenue downstream of their ability to extract fees in a very simple way, like because they own the customer relationship. That is like, everybody understands this in Web 2 and SaaS. Like if you own the customer relationship, that is an extremely important position to hold. I think we kind of tricked ourselves into thinking it was going to be different here. And I don't think it is. And so, I think over the coming years here, we're going to get more and more data that shows like, hey, proximity to the origination of the order flow is actually the only thing that matters here. And I think that's going to cause like a big inversion in the valuation of a lot of these networks. And the ones that lean into it early on and start to like help facilitate the origination of more order flow will do very, very well. But those that don't will struggle substantially. That's kind of how I'm looking at the world right now. And it's cool to see all of us on this call are thinking about it in different ways. Like Conor's talking about creating new types of applications with chain abstraction. Honestly, that's very exciting to me. I think, just the objective reality is, this is obviously true, that all the existing order flow is funneling through existing applications. I think there's a huge opportunity to acquire that order flow and use it to mature the solver marketplaces that are out there today, because the reality is they're like quite immature, and they need more order flow to like pull in more sophisticated market participants to provide better services on that end. So that was a lot, but that's kind of how I'm looking at the world.
Sounds like you'd be very bullish on application-specific sequencing.
Yeah, no, I think what we're seeing is L2s are being parasitic to the revenue of Ethereum L1 right now, and I think that's going to go even further. I think application-specific sequencing is going to start capturing those priority fees from L2s, and I think the front ends of the applications themselves will start to take a significant amount of the fees. So yeah, the further away you are from like that user clicking the button, the more bearish it is in terms of your ability to actually capture value, in my opinion.
I think it's very interesting, to dive into like sort of like the types of order flows there are, if there are new applications, because in certain applications, order flow will probably be not super valuable, but there will be something else like it will be purely a fee paid to the smart contract for a service, right? Where I think order flow specifically is mainly for financial transactions. Like if you have like bridge transactions that then also perform a financial transaction on the destination chain, it's like very much something you'll see in these chain abstracted applications, right? I think those will create like super valuable order flow. But anything, because what I'm very excited about as well, like what Conor said, is like giving sort of like Web 2 devs the tools to create sort of like applications that have all the advantages of being like a Web3 app or like a crypto app, without having to have like deep knowledge of like gas golfing, right? And allow app developers to do what they do best, which is building apps. And I'm very curious what sort of like use cases come out of that. Yeah, sorry, a little bit of a tangent.
I think it's a very valid point. Like some order flow will be worth 10x or more other order flow. And I think it's largely downstream of like contentious state, like who is trying to update certain things ahead of others. This is where all like a vast majority of the revenue of these networks today comes from, priority fees. And that comes downstream of people trying to update the same state at a single point in time and paying a priority to get ahead of it. I have to hop into a meeting. Congratulations to the whole Arcana team. Very excited to see this wallet out there. And also shout out to everybody else on this call. Very exciting to see us all kind of like, it's funny, we're all very like friendly and collaborative today. I've talked with Tabasco about this before, but we're all like in a very similar paradigm. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the coming years here. But very excited to be working on this with all of you today. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Austin. Yeah, pleasure. Take care.
Yeah.
I'll riff on top of that. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to mistake because I've got a contrarian view. So like I think there's a lot of vaporware today. 100%. I do think a lot of the infrastructure projects that have been kind of built over the years, like a bit of history, like Enso built 2 applications, well, 3. We've done a vampire attack, we've done social trading, we've done a DeFi super app. An infrastructure tool that we built now was only because we had a large problem and realized other people had that problem, right? So I kind of see that maybe if people are going full infra today and there's already a solution that does this, then it's not needed, right? And people should go into applications. But I still do see that there's so many problems, like Jasper was saying, of how do we build tooling for Web2 developers to build applications really easily? Like that still is not there today. Now, I do shell for people to build applications really, really fast, and that's kind of where we should get into this ecosystem. But I still think there's parts of the stack that are missing. So I don't think it's the right time to go directly for the users as of today. I think still focus on the infrastructure that enables developers to build new primitives, to build applications to then attract different types of users. Because whenever we launched our social trading like 3 years ago, or like 2 years ago as well, of the DeFi super app like a year ago, there was no users. So like that's the first problem we need to solve is we need users, new users to come into this ecosystem. And then to do that, there needs to be tooling for developers that can build really good user experience journeys for them people to then want to use it, right? Like we can't expect or want people to, walk to someone on the street and go, hey, set up, go into this protocol. Yeah, cool. Okay, where do I buy this? Where am I sending my money to? Okay, I need to go there. Then I need to withdraw that ETH to then this wallet to then, there's so many complications that really users just shouldn't need to care about.
Yeah, this is an interesting point. I did a talk actually during Abstract Summit at Token. The title of the talk was we don't just need more apps. And so my argument was that, there's this ongoing debate, which is that should we invest and focus on applications or should we invest and focus on infrastructure? My take is similar to what Conor said, which is that we're a little bit too early to like over invest and focus on applications. I don't think that we're at a point in the ecosystem where it's just a means of like, there's just not enough people building applications for us to be successful. I don't think that our lack of consumer adoption is just because we don't have enough apps. If you actually look into it, there's a lot of apps in Web3. The problem is that I don't think that the developer tooling is a big thing, of course. I think there's a lot of interesting organizations that are improving this. I'm quite bullish on alt VMs to allow you to build applications with like familiar scripting languages and whatnot. But anyways, I think that from a broader perspective, and this can actually be attributed to chain abstraction solving to some degree, fragmentation between chains is in a large part a contributor to what I would consider to be misaligned incentives that don't necessarily incentivize like truly user-facing and consumer-ready applications. I think the way the space works today is that we've cultivated a very niche user base of people that are willing to tolerate the friction in the space, that are willing to manually bridge across chains, that are willing to navigate multiple different wallets, whatever, that are okay with that in the space. And the reason they're okay with that is because they are here for a very specific purpose that makes dealing with that friction worth it, which is that they want to make money off of being in Web3. And so what type of user do we have almost everywhere? It's like highly speculative individuals, or it's like, airdrop farmers, right? And so this is like the 2 most common archetype of user. People that don't fit within one of these 2 groups is very uncommon in the space, because the way that our incentives are built, applications that optimize for this, that build for speculative traders or build for airdrop farmers, they're the most successful because those are the most users in the space. And the only users that are willing to get into the space because of the friction attached to it are people who do it for some sort of financial reward. And so we have this kind of like death spiral that we're in right now, which is just that, we build more apps, and these apps are usually like half-baked, and they almost all funnel out to some incentive. And then Web3 is still way too complicated on multiple different fronts and fragmented, and there are all these fundamental user experience problems that result in the only people willing to put up with it are those that are coming in for the speculation. And so this is a cycle that perpetuates itself. And going back to the claim that I made and I believe in is that if you can eliminate fragmentation, which I think is the source of a lot of this, right? Because there's not, the way that I see it, there's no real competition between apps and Web3 right now. Maybe if you look at Solana, there's some real competition like within that ecosystem or within like base applications, but especially when you look at broader Web3, if I'm deploying an application on base, I'm not competing with an application on Arbitrum necessarily. There's some exceptions to this, like huge apps that exceed the boundaries of certain chains. But for the most part, competition is not akin to that of Web2 or typical free markets. It's partly because of this fragmentation. Because users have to, like, every chain that they use is a distinct ecosystem of applications, so they don't compete on the same basis as if just, if I were just using Web2. And so if you can solve this problem first and basically create an ecosystem where every application is equally competitive with one another, regardless of where they're deployed, and as a result, from a user perspective, I can access them equally, regardless of where they're deployed, this starts to, over time, shift incentives in favor of consumer-centric experiences, because now not only can more users get into the space that can get over these friction points and don't need to go through this immense barrier to actually get in the space. And as a result, you have more people that are consumer aligned that aren't in here only for the incentives. And you have better competition between applications, which actually incentivizes them to build things that optimize for user mindshare and true user mindshare. And so you kind of start shifting the cycle away from like heavily incentivizing speculative individuals towards more and more, more so incentivizing consumer applications and things that actually optimize for user experience, optimize for user mindshare. And so I explained it a little bit more elegantly during that talk, but the idea is that chain abstraction will be one of many dominoes, ideally, that lead to an ecosystem that rewards applications that compete with one another based on quality and based on the degree of UX that their application has, not based on whoever can, shout the loudest about, how they're allowing you to gamble in some different way. I think that is a symptom of an immature ecosystem. And so I think chain abstraction, it's going to take time. I don't think it's going to happen instantly, but will help alleviate that problem and create something that's a little bit more akin to Web2, in my opinion.
And it shouldn't be related to, I'll just say something short, 1 sec. And it shouldn't be related to artificial incentivizations such as tokens, points, all of these Zeely Galaxy campaigns should not be related to that. A lot of these projects' usage is all artificial. Like, if I'm seeing an application saying they have 1 million daily active users, they don't. A lot of crypto applications don't have that. And then you start looking behind the curtains. You start to realize you're like, people are sibling. They're having multiple accounts, doing multiple transactions. And there's one person that could own 150, 200K accounts. And a lot of it's not organic. And I think this is part of the issue of points and airdrops. And this is why I'm looking forward to, again, the project that I can't mention that will go live in a couple of weeks. Kind of eradicates that. It's built on top of Enso, like it's a whole new primitive. But Jasper, didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think Tabasco's point of, like, if you abstract the chains and it doesn't really matter what's deployed where anymore, you're always just going to get the best rate. The idea of launching an Aave fork on the next L2 and just getting people to deposit there because it's essentially a bet on the L2 becoming valuable and you becoming the Aave of this L2 becomes like way less likely and probably way less successful. And I think that's a cool point. Like, it forces people to be more innovative. Like, if you want to compete with Aave, you now actually have to compete with Aave instead of just forking it onto like something that might be successful and sort of like lift off of whatever opportunity there is there. I like that a lot. Good framing.
We need new applications. We need new primitives. We can't just recycle. It's we're at a kind of a stagnant state right now. Kind of to riff on your point, like we need new primitives, need new things to be built.
Great stuff. Fantastic points all around, I think. I mean, we definitely need new applications, need new primitives. Hopefully, the release of chain abstraction protocols is that one seminal moment, or like how Tabasco put it, like the first domino to fall in a series of them. But I'm also hoping that we're all very cognizant of the fact that this tends to happen where we release products or protocols, and or we intend to release them, and they just get, almost everyone gets stuck in this cycle of trying to ensure that it's the ideal solution. It's the last thing that any developer would need. And in the process, what happens is basically trying to get to this ideal state. People delay sort of releases and putting things in people's hands, and you get to this point where someone else just puts stuff out there, optimizes for distribution, captures mindshare, and now suddenly things are going down a very different route. And the examples of this in the crypto space are innumerable. And there are many graves of very nice ideas that simply have not seen light of day. So hopefully we can get to this place in a very iterative manner, and yeah. So another thing that I really want to talk about. So we're talking about all these fantastic things of this future where we're abstracting away chains and no more forks, and applications need to drive value, concentrate on capturing mind share of users, which is what every application does and ought to be doing, rather than worrying about playing PBL games and points and airdrops and all of those sorts of things. But to kind of get to this place, I'm sure that there are a couple of like caveats, gotchas that we as proponents of this space, somewhere sort of like either overlook or tend to like paper over those cracks and not really like get into. And like, for example, two things that stand out in my mind is almost anything that is absent of, like, say, standards, any sort of like minimal standards that still does allow for innovation to happen. You end up in like these weird states, like I think we got in with ERC 4337. And the other thing is, things like solvers is another thing that most chain abstraction projects that talk about like in this intent solver design. I think Enzo and Conor, the equivalent of something like this would be graphers on the Enzo network. And we talk about, how, so there's just this people and this whole community is just going to come and, start doing all of these things. And so the answer to everything is like solvers. But so some of these things are things that I think we sort of don't really like very deeply address. I don't know if all of them need to be deeply addressed at this time, but what are around all of you, what are some of these gotchas or caveats that we tend to overlook and people ought to know about right now?
I mean, since you kind of addressed this point, I'll kind of add on to this. So I completely agree. A lot of these intent networks, they may raise a lot of money, they may spend a lot of money inside events, but they haven't shipped anything, right? And a lot of the problems are being shifted to solvers, resolvers, fillers, whatever, transmitters, graphers, whatever, right? Now, what these individuals are having to do, these solvers, an intent network may have a completely different purpose. They may be focused on NFTs, they may be focused purely on trading, they may be focused on cross-chain, and we're creating this very branded name of solvers that they'll just figure out everything, right? We can see that's not true. Why is it not true? 1, you need to run your own node infrastructure. 2, you need to understand every single chain. 3, you need to integrate every single protocol. 4, you need to have PhD mathematicians for building algos. 4, you need to have pretty good servers for doing all of this as well. And it just keeps adding up and up and up, right? So you're basically doing many different roles within one. What Enzo's done is kind of identified this, because we were running and we're still running solvers, that we break the solver into different parts. So we have what we call an action provider, a grapher, and a validator, right? Action provider comes to the ENSO network saying, here's how you interact with this protocol, right? So it's like a map. Here's how you execute on protocol X. This could be an AVI deposit. Second one are purely mathematicians. They focus on algos, right? They just can use the data that's on the ENSO chain, propose the solution, and then the validators then simulate it and then host a node infrastructure, right? So we kind of broke that down, right, into different parts. In terms of some other gotchas into this ecosystem, I think everyone assumes solvers hold liquidity. They don't. That's market makers. Having that identification of solvers versus market makers. Yeah, cross-chain management of inventory is very, very hard and a lot of risk, especially once you enter long-tail assets, i.e. a shitcoin or a meme coin. Like, people are not going to hold exposure to that. So you're still going to have part of like USDC, ETH, USDT on like maybe holding inventory and then combining call data to then go from that good base asset into a long tail asset, right? Like, that's still not fully figured out either right now. And yeah, basically, how would people interact with all of these systems into one place? Now we have tons of different intent networks. A developer is now having to make a choice between all of them. It would be better if they just have a choice of one, right? So then you're gonna have these abstractions of abstractions of abstractions of layers. So it's going to be very interesting.
Who aggregates the aggregators?
Yep. Yeah, it's
and
already
then who
happening.
aggregates the aggregators of aggregators. Yeah, that's
It's literally
interesting.
happening.
I've been saying this on like the last few calls, including yesterday with Mayurs. Like, I think solvers have become the new sort of like ZK, we'll figure it out later scapegoat, where like if something is super, super hard, then people say, oh, solvers will do it. And then because it's sort of like this vague umbrella term, people just accept that answer. It's just as like with like scaling issues back in the past, and people are like, oh no, we'll just use CK, and then people are like, oh okay, they'll use CK, that's an answer, so that'll do it, right? I think they are sort of like the same thing. And then also, Conor, you said market makers and solvers are different things. I think we just need to accept that solvers is an umbrella term for way too many things, and we need to start sort of like subcategorizing what each of these things is and what they do, right? So I would argue that a market maker is a solver, but it solves with a specific purpose, and one of its attributes is that it holds inventory. Then you have like, I don't know, there's more. Like, there's like action providers, etc. There's so many different things here. So yeah, I hammer down the solver point a lot. There is more. I just thought of one, but it split my mind. So if Tabasco wants to go in between, and then I'll try to come up with another point.
Yeah, no, I think you guys made interesting points. We when I was first, researching intents and solver-based systems and things of this nature, it took me a long time. I could never find what is a solver. It took me a long time to actually figure out what this actually meant, and I realized I was like, all of these terms kind of vaguely mean the same thing. I mean, you have filler, liquidity provider. There's some like distinctions between the two, but I think the maybe it's the chain abstracted nerds channel. If you guys are in there, I think the profile picture is a meme of this where it's like Spider-Man pointing at, it's like solver pointing at filler, pointing at liquidity provider or something like this. But anyways, I think regarding Mayor's question, I think it's an interesting question, but I have a little bit of a different take on it. I think whenever you look at these things like nuances with solver networks, or like the problem that we're a little bit closer to is like ERC 437, right? So like fragmentation between smart accounts and the necessity to deposit and things of this nature, like these small little friction points and incompatibilities that need to be solved. To be honest, I don't see these problems, whether it's that or whether it's like like inconsistency with like solver terminology or difficulty managing cross-chain inventory. These are all real problems, but I don't think these are problems that have any sort of weight in terms of actually reducing even the medium-term implementation of chain abstraction. I do think things like ERC 437 need to be solved. I don't see it as our responsibility, at least at Particle, to solve this problem. I think that there are people much smarter than myself that are looking at this problem, that are fixing it. We have 7702, which we're very bullish on, and that we are happy to start using as soon as it's implemented in a widespread way. We right now use our own primarily solver system, but we talk to a million different guys, Nomial, Everclear, to solve some the smaller issues with it. And so for us, the way that we see it is we've solved a foundational problem here. There are nuances to solving that problem. There is nothing in Web3, and this is just how it is with early infrastructure. There's nothing that is a perfect solution. You can even look at even more granular, for example, with your Conor wallet. And I talked to some of your team members about this as well, which is that when you have wallets, and we explore this too, and chain abstracted wallets in specific, and you go to an application and you're using an injected provider, how does that application read a chain abstracted balance? It's going to read whatever the balance of your account is on that chain. So how do you make it read a balance that is actually aggregated from multiple chains? This is a difficult problem. You guys actually figured out how to solve it to some degree in a lot of these applications that I was testing out earlier today. And so that was fantastic. But these are tiny problems that I think over time are going to be ironed out. I think that these providers have solved the base problem here, which is, for example, in the case of chain abstraction, it's just the UX friction attached to fragmentation, right? We can say that's kind of the problem that chain abstraction is addressing. The nuances attached to that and kind of the smaller gotchas, I think, are right now just a result of still not only chain abstraction being new, but I recorded a video today where I was like, chain abstraction has not been possible up until very recently, just in the past few months, because chain abstraction has been made possible through a number of adjacent technologies that have grown alongside it. Solvers are a great example of this. Account abstraction is a great example of this. As an ecosystem, we've been building up towards this ability to create a chain abstracted experience. Not that that's the pinnacle of all this infrastructure, but this has been enabled through a lot of this infrastructure that has been being built for years, and it is just now really kind of coming to its apex in terms of usability. I think there's a long way to go. Of course, account abstraction is one of those things that is still not complete. We recognize that as somebody who actually uses ERC 437, but I think there's a lot of these small problems that, I think if you look at everything that we just discussed, all those core problems, my expectation is that if you fast forward 8 months, these are not problems anymore. There's probably going to be a different set of problems that we can't anticipate that we're all trying to solve. But this is just how infrastructure progresses. This is how things of this nature move. There's always going to be a smaller inconsistency to solve, something to fix. But I think the way that we're seeing it right now, from a user perspective, there's only one goal right now. It's how do we get users in the door and using this, and how do we make this experience standard? That's goal number one. All of the infrastructural nuances and issues that are attached to that will fix over time. The way that I see it is fix the problem first. If there's some rough edges, then that's something that we can deal with. But this vertical is too important to focus on the smaller parts first. We need to actually fix it, and then we can move on to debating what the difference between a filler and a solver is.
Fantastic. No, I think those are extremely important points. I think, especially the fact that you guys are also taking this extremely pragmatic approach. We're almost at time, but I don't want to let you guys leave before addressing this one very quick thing. We seem to be playing very nice with each other, all of us in this chain abstraction family, so to say. And I think even Austin was talking about it some time back. What gives? Why is this happening? Because you don't really sit and see all the ZK guys coming and doing a podcast. You don't see. You always see these guys competing and trying to pull each other down and things like that. But here, people are more than ready to collaborate, work together that much more. Why is this happening, and why is it relevant? Why is that important? All three of you.
I think it's very new. Still, we talk about we've been talking about this for a while, but if we take ETH Denver as sort of the first sort of I feel like ETH Denver is the first conference in which people really started talking about chain abstraction, and from there it's been up only essentially. If we take that, it's been, what is it, 8 months? Yeah, 9 months. That is not a long time, right? And I think we also all realize that there is still a lot of work to do. And I think a lot of the projects are very transparent about their trade-offs. And I think these sort of discussions really enforce that. And then finally, there's also this idea that the chain abstraction stack is sort of like too big to be all solved by one company. So there is sort of like required cooperation as well, right? Like we are not looking to do anything on the account side. We are not looking to do anything on the sort of like, I don't know, like intent side, for example, right? Like our goal is basically just creating a standard for data querying, and it happens to serve some chain abstraction use cases. So for us, that's quite simple. Yeah, so those are sort of like my initial thoughts.
Okay, yeah, I can add on to that. I think we've all been building in the space long enough to realize that if you try to build everything yourself, it doesn't work. And it's not going to make the ecosystem move forward. So by, like Jasper was saying, like focusing on isolated parts and then combining them together, this is actually what helps the developers the most. Like I think that's fundamentally what's happening. People are focused on niches, and then those niches work with other niches to then help developers and so forth. Do I think everyone is playing nicely though? No. Like you probably see my Twitter, I actively call out projects that don't ship, right? Do I think that's just in this narrative itself? No, like I do this primarily with intents, but it's also for other parts, right? Why that behavior is being done? Because I think we're at a catalyst point of the industry maybe failing. If we don't have people shipping more products and just selling narratives and hopes and dreams and just being exit liquidity, and we're going to go down a really dark path, and it's going to take a while to get out of that darkness. But in terms of on the nice side, I also think that we have understood that it's better to openly share insights with each other to also then have a greater purpose in a way. So before it was very dog eat dog world inside of crypto, and it has been for a while. But now it feels a bit more like we have a greater purpose because we all kind of went through the bear markets together as well. I think that's also a big indicator, right? These teams are not teams that have been around for 2-3 months, right? No, these are builders that have been full-time for years and years and years. And these friendships and collaborations started at the depths of the industry when there was no users, whenever ETH was like a couple of $100, right? So I think that plays into it as well. And I think if one project succeeds, it helps everyone else as well. This is not a one-eat-all situation. That's what it looks like to me.
I think that's going to shift as well, though. Like, just to be like fully transparent, like I think the people that are like very much competing at the same layer, that friendliness, I think at some point is going to go away. Like, even if you do like each other a lot and you've worked together a lot, I think at some point competition is competition, and you're trying to create value for, I don't know, your team and people.
Sure. But that's why I said, it's discretion. Like I do that with intents, right? Like our main competitor,
Got it.
I don't
For
even know
sure.
if they're ever going to go live, right? So like that's I'm good, right? Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, I think these are interesting. I'm trying to figure out. I don't know. Maybe you can DM me, Connor, who your main competitor is. I was thinking about it when you mentioned it earlier. But anyways, I think this is actually a really good question. Nobody's asked this before, I don't think, in terms of like why is chain abstraction so friendly. I think the first thing is that chain abstraction is way smaller than I think most people actually think it is. There's a lot of projects that are sometimes categorized loosely under chain abstraction, but the number of products that are actually building for chain abstraction and that know even what it is that they're building for is tiny. I've done a lot of analysis on this. And my full-time job is tweeting about chain abstraction basically, and so I look into this a lot. And the chain abstraction vertical is I mean, I'll go through it and I'm like, oh, who do I want to invite to this thing? And I'm like, there's like 10 people that I could, like 10 organizations that are part of this list that are like actually building for chain abstraction. There's some like other organizations that tag themselves or like, some bridges or whatever. And I tweet pretty frequently where I'm like, bridges are not chain abstraction, cross chain is not chain, like, because I think that there's the vertical seems much larger than it actually is. And so I think because of its size, naturally, chain abstraction is a very ambitious goal. It is not something that, as was mentioned, can be done by even 3 or 4 protocols. The stack itself is 3 layers, and so there needs to be multiple protocols addressing these different problems. You can even granularize that to more like 4 or 5 layers or whatever. I think you need a vertical stack of solutions to achieve chain abstraction. But further than that, I don't even think we have enough solutions that are actually addressing every single problem in chain abstraction equally. I think maybe just until very recently we did. And so I think it's a symptom of the size of the the overall narrative in the vertical right now. It's very small. Even on the account level, there's like 3 projects. It's like One Balance, Arcana, Particle, maybe, I don't know who else. That's kind of it. I think so. It's and then on the application level, you have like Omni, Cluster, I guess Biconomy, Agort, and so it's tiny right now. And so I think over time, as things get larger and more projects come into the space, like I'm expecting we're probably going to have 5-10 account level projects in the next year or so. Things are going to get more competitive. There's going to end up being 2 or 3 large projects that actually end up winning. And so this is how I think about it. I think it's just a matter of time before things probably do become more competitive. And I tweeted the other day, I was like, PvP is not a bad thing. PvP is a good thing. It actually yields better protocols, better infrastructure because it's competitive in nature. So I think that will end up being a good thing. But right now, it's actually better that chain abstraction is more tight knit. That we're working towards a very ambitious common goal right now. Once that's achieved at a more foundational layer, the vertical will expand, and we will we'll get to a point where things are a little more PvP. I think that'll be a good thing.
Fantastic. Yeah. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you all, and thanks for sharing and actually speaking your mind. And it's quite refreshing when all of these sorts of things happen. We are at time. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll be back again soon talking more things chain abstraction. Jasper, Tabasco, Conor, thank you guys so much for taking out the time, and look forward to meeting you guys at DevCon.
Likewise, I appreciate
Thanks for having me. Ciao, guys.
Thank you very much, guys.
See you later.
Take care.
See you guys
See you.
soon. Bye-bye.